Welcome to the O Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
We are back after a little break,
Little
and
hiatus.
let's be honest with the people about the break. Dan had a little Botox action and looked a little
And I
like John Hamm.
and I think it shows. Actually, I don't want to just besmirch anybody on the pod, so I said we'll just leave that for off the air. But you and I were talking about this because it was a certain actor who we won't name. You sent me a clip, like a still from a commercial or something they were in,
Yes.
and you were railing on the clear Botox
I mean, that's the thing. You have
usage.
to take like 2 years off till your face de-swells.
Yeah, remember Larry Sanders when he didn't he go get his eyes done, and
Jeez.
everybody knew
Right.
that he was trying to play it off that he didn't know. For the younger viewers out there, listeners, check Google Larry Sanders. You'll actually the studio that's out on Apple TV right now is kind of in the same vein, not exactly the same, but it's I would say it's probably certainly influenced and inspired by
Yeah,
this
you're talking
younger
about the TV series,
the studio. I said on Apple
studio.
TV. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I we were talking about the miracle of air travel and the fact that a
You were
mere
here like
a mere
just a
48
second
hours
ago.
ago, yeah, I was there. I was in Boston for a little visit. We put out a couple of things up on the social media while we were together, but and this doesn't happen very often, but this was another occasion where once again we pivoted. Big shock, folks, for those that follow us. We pivoted away from the original idea, which was going to be a deep dive into the Criterion edition of Risky Business. And we've done an episode on Tom Cruise and why we both still believe, even more so now, that he
Mhm.
deserves an Oscar. And at this point, it's going to end up being the Scent of a Woman consolation prize, no matter
And
when
the
he
reason
gets it, if
we
he gets
picked
it.
that is because this weekend opens his big last Mission Impossible film.
Correct. So we thought there was a bit of a tie in there, and he and many other celebrities, as of this recording, are at the Cannes Film Festival.
Oh,
On the French Riviera, having a great old time, and I just saw a picture of him, a video clip of him in London on top of like the BFI theater, I think over there in London. Way that for him it's like it's nothing, but
he's nuts.
promoting the
Mission
final
Impossible.
reckoning, obviously,
Yeah.
yeah. But so we'll get back to this for sure because I
Yeah.
definitely want to do a deep dive on that one. But so then I was there and we start talking about a film that we did a first look on, which is the
Right.
film Rust that stars Alec Baldwin. And, of course, during the first look, and we were discussing this a little bit on the commute home today, was that, we, in the first look, we really spend probably a little bit of time, maybe more than needed, with a little context, a little background for those that don't know. There was a fatal incident that happened, a shooting that took place on the set of Rust. There was a trial. Ultimately, the charges were dropped. It was very dramatic conclusion to that case.
Yeah, and somebody was killed.
Correct. Helena Hutchins, who we'll talk
Right.
about because she was the cinematographer on this film, and we're definitely going to talk about her.
And that, for me, I was on the fence on whether or not I was even gonna watch this. But with you here, we
Mhm.
kind of both said, "Why not? We're together, we can watch a film, there's nothing at the movies to go see."
Right.
So,
And,
that's
and
how we came across this.
And I had, it popped up in the headlines because it came out May 2nd of 2025. So it had just released and it was very limited release in theaters, maybe about 100 theaters or so. And then it was also simultaneously released on streaming, which
Right,
is how we watched it.
correct.
And so that kind of caught my eye. And as you said, we sort of, decided to pivot away from the risky business. And there's a weird tie in there
We
with
would
the title
have gone to the
Risky Business.
movies had there been something worthy, and that's the
Yeah.
problem these days
Yeah.
is like, if Mission Impossible came out while you were here, we would have seen that in IMAX,
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no
but we
question.
had that opportunity, and
Well,
it's
another what's that?
it's shocking to me that not every week there's a film you wanna see.
It's not shocking to me. I mean, this has been the state of the box office now. They've never really
I
recovered from COVID. They just
No,
haven't.
no.
And that's the thing. It's really nothing to do with that anymore, right? We're many years removed from that experience now. It's just as you always continue to point out, where's the quality storytelling
Right.
and just the quality filmmaking to get us in the theater?
Yep.
Um, and maybe one of those films because we did talk about Black Bag, right? Steven
Right.
Soderbergh, is that right? Right?
Steven Soderbergh's
We
latest,
talked a
so
little bit
maybe
about
we'll do
that.
that.
Yeah. But the other thing about Rust was the fact that, it in the headline was it made $25,000. Again, it was in the theater for 2 seconds,
Right.
but on a budget of like 7, 8,000,000, depending on where
8,000,000.
you read that. Yeah. So, very low budget. So, anyways, so we're sitting there, and again, this doesn't happen very often, but we're watching the film together because
Mhm.
normally we watch and we don't swap notes, but we're there in the same space.
Yeah.
So we're kind of giving an open commentary as it's going on.
Right. Which is unusual because if we were in a theater, we would have kept our mouths shut,
Mhm.
but we did make like you said, it was almost like doing a
Was
commentary.
that a little subtle PSA from Mike of Old Brother Podcast? I think it was. I think you were
No,
talking to other audience members
no,
with
no.
that shut up. Like we would have been quiet.
Yeah,
Most other people don't know
maybe
how to be quiet
maybe
in the
you're
theater.
right. Maybe,
Yeah.
subconsciously, I was thinking that.
Well, I heard, it's funny, Minecraft, I guess, has turned into a bit of this generation's Rocky Horror Picture Show. I guess there's a little bit of, you
People
know,
interacting with the screen.
fan interaction. I think of the clip that I showed you that was online with these 2 guys that broke out into a legitimate lightsaber fight at the
Yeah,
end of the 20th anniversary showing of, Revenge of the
the
Sith
Sith.
for Star
Yeah.
Wars. That was pretty funny. Hats off to those guys. So, we went into this, and Mike, I gotta say, because I mentioned the Cannes Film Festival, right? There's like red carpet going on right now as we're recording this and all of that.
Mhm.
And I was watching a broadcast from French television, and who did they bring up but Gerard Depardieu,
Wow.
uh, who's been swept up into the Me Too movement and has many, many
Oh,
allegations against him, and one that's going to trial. So,
wow.
you know, but the reason I bring that up is because, first of all, Cyrano de Bergerac, right? Um,
Right.
he did a film with Andy McDowell, who we've talked about many times
Green
on this. Green Card, great
green
film,
card.
great film. So it once again raised. In fact, the uh, woman who was anchoring this particular broadcast mentioned the very thing that we've been saying on the podcast for years now, which is this idea of can you separate the art from the artist? It's
And
another great example.
yeah, Depardieu was like the biggest movie star in France.
That's right.
You know, it was we didn't know if he would make it here, but he gave a
Mhm,
great performance in Cyrano, and
mhm.
but yeah, that's the thing, and it relates to this movie
It
because a
does.
lot of
Again,
people have feelings about Alec Baldwin one way or the other politically.
sure. But can you comment a little bit on what I think you've shared before on the podcast, which is I hate to say endorsement, but the support or however you want to characterize it of Helena Hutchins' spouse.
Yeah, her husband, now widower, wanted the film released. And as part of the settlement in the civil case, he
Mhm,
would become the new executive producer. And I think it's because he wanted his wife's work, her final work, seen.
mhm.
And, I think that's one of the big reasons I finally said, yeah, I think I'll watch this. Um, Although that may have changed after seeing it.
Mhm. Well,
But
all right, let me run down the tail of tape here real quick. So, directed and written by Joel Souza,
and let me
co-written with Baldwin. And
yeah,
Souza was, of course, injured in this incident that took place on the set. He was right there behind the camera
He was
with
hit
Helena.
by the
The
same
bullet
bullet.
by the same bullet when it was shoulder. So it's very, very tragic.
And Dan, before you even go on, let me point out that a week
Mm,
before the release, Joel Souza makes a statement.
right.
I wish I never made this film. I wish I never wrote it. That's not a great way to promote it.
Exactly. I mean, in fact, I mean, he did make the decision at some
Right.
point, right? At a certain point in April 2023, actually, to resume the filming.
Not
So
only resume, but reshoot. And we
reshoot,
found
yeah.
out after watching it how much
Mhm.
was reshot.
Right, right. So, anyways, it directed and written by Joel Souza. I think Baldwin may have a co-writing credit there too. Again, Alec Baldwin stars as character Harland Rust. Travis Fimmel, who I was commenting about when we were watching it because I loved him in Raised by Wolves. He's also in the Dune Prophecy series on, I think, Max. And he plays a character called Preacher in this. Frances Fisher, who we've talked about. Of course, she was just fantastic in Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood, just one of the best westerns you'll ever see. Josh Hopkins, who plays a character named Wood Helm, which I know you're going to comment on, was one of the recastings
Yes.
because of the delay in production on this film with all that was going on. Patrick Scott McDermott is another who plays a young actor or young character named Lucas in the film.
And
And then I
those
did
2
want,
parts
yeah,
are big parts.
they're very big parts.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
recasting them was
Yeah.
a huge ordeal.
And Brady Noon was one of the ones that was recast along with Jensen Ackles. Those were the two actors that, they ended up having scheduling conflicts and
Right.
ultimately had to leave. So, the last credit I wanted to mention was, again, we chatted about this during, but Abraham Ben Ruby, a small part in this film, but we mentioned how he was in a show that we watched way back in the early 90s
Nobody's gonna know this.
called Parker Lewis Can't Lose. If you've seen this show and you know what we're talking about, kudos, drop some comments on the video because
And
we want to hear from you.
it's kind of a ripoff of Ferris Bueller,
Right.
but that's we
Yeah.
used to watch it every Sunday.
And I recognized him almost immediately, didn't I? And he had the beard and everything, but I said, I know. And then boom, I
It
said,
was
I think he's
shocking
from Parker Lewis. And I Google it and there he was.
because he
But
played a teenager in Parker Lewis, and he's kind
yeah.
of an old man.
Now here's the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon is he was also coincidentally in this film that you
Open
see a poster of
range.
behind me, Open Range, which is one of my favorite westerns. It's right up there for me with Unforgiven. I know that's blasphemy when I'm talking to you, but it's a great western if you haven't seen it.
I
Kevin
have to
Costner.
rewatch it. It's
Oh,
not in my
great.
collection because it was never released on Blu-ray in the States.
We just did an episode on the Grifters with Annette Bening. She's in Open Range as
Yes.
well. But the one thing that I showed you related to Open Range was that Abraham Ben Ruby started out with a very young and unknown Diego Luna, who of course
Yes.
people now know as Cassian Andor from Star Wars fame.
That's right.
And as of this recording, Mike, we are just a short few minutes away from the finale of the Andor series. I
Cannot
can't
wait
wait.
for that.
Can't wait. Mike, can you give us the quick plot here? Give us the synopsis of the film.
Oh, man. Quick? I
Yeah,
don't know
give us.
about
You want
that.
me to do the IMDb
Yeah, do the
synopsis? Okay.
IMDb because
Okay.
this is all over the place.
An orphaned boy of 13 left to fend for himself and his younger brother in 1880s Wyoming is sentenced to hang for the accidental killing of a local rancher. His estranged grandfather breaks him out of jail and they go on the run to Mexico. Pretty intriguing plot, right? It's a
Sounds
pretty
good.
interesting. Yeah, sounds good. Where do we go? What's your general impressions of the film?
It's not good. And I will say the best thing, and I have to give a shout out to Bianca Klein because she's the
Mhm.
one who came in to replace
Thank you. Yeah.
Hutchins.
Mhm.
And she had to reshoot a lot of stuff that was already shot, but she looked at her notes. I guess Hutchins made tons of notes.
Mhm. Sure.
She, um, studied all of her filming. She talked to all the cameramen that were still on the project, and really, she created a seamless I couldn't tell a
Well,
difference.
I mean, we didn't have the luxury of listening to a audio commentary or something like that, so I have no sense of how much of this is her
Right,
and how much of this is Helena, and I guess that speaks to what you're saying, right?
exactly.
That's a testament to it. So I guess the essence of what you're seeing, the general look and feel and kind of cinematic quality, I mean, really all credit due to Helena Hutchins, which
And
and that's one of the first things, Mike, that we commented on
yes,
favorably was the look of the film. It was beautifully shot.
the opening shot after this, I don't still don't understand why they had this tight close up of somebody's eyes. I guess it was Baldwin. I still don't know. Do you
Mm,
remember that?
I vaguely now that you
That was
mention it,
the
yeah.
opening shot, but then it went from that to, like, a scenery shot of the sky, and it was beautiful,
Yeah.
and there was saloons throughout this like there are in the Old West,
Mhm.
and a lot of times, I think it was just candlelit, and it looked beautiful.
Yeah.
So, what I liked about the film was what she did, her cinematography along with Bianca, and again, we don't know. Obviously, she studied her style,
Mhm.
so I think we have to give credit to her,
Sure.
and
Sure.
I think she
It's
had
a
a great career on the horizon.
it's an interesting, yeah, like a posthumous collaboration, but
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, well shot, beautifully cinematic. I think, one thing that we agreed on, probably a third of the way into the film, at least halfway into the film, is it's just too many superfluous characters,
way
and I think
too many.
this is where you were going when you made that comment as we were, sharing about the plot, which is
Yeah,
it just kind of was all over the place, and I said to you, they didn't serve the narrative, they did nothing to move the plot forward,
right.
but there was a great germ of an idea they could have run with, which is, as I pointed out to you, is this character that Travis Fimmel played, Preacher.
Yeah,
It's the classic white hat, black hat, good versus
correct.
bad. If they had just I said if they had made it about like a revenge kind of premise, right? Where his father or mother or something was murdered by Harlan Rust, and he goes on he's on a hunt to chase
Harlan
down
Rust,
Rust.
the name of the character played by Alec
Correct.
Baldwin.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
That would have been to me more intriguing and a bit more captivating and maybe it would have helped the pace of the film because this movie had no business being 2 hours and 19 minutes.
No.
2 hours and 19 minutes, no.
How many times have I said, "There's a good 90-minute film here," but there's even with the character you're talking about,
Mhm.
the kind of the preacher who was
Yes.
very charismatic too. That
Mhm.
was something the other lead totally lacked. Had
He
no
really did.
charisma.
He really
When he
did.
was on screen, I was bored.
Very flat,
So
and
even
we don't know to what extent coming in sort of late to a project like this
right,
impacts that, and how do you pick up on the rhythms and just the tone and the vibe? I mean, I guess that's your job as an actor, but still,
and
it's a tough situation to be put into.
it was a necessary character because he played basically a deputy that was kinda hunting down Harlan Rust for prior crimes. So you had to have that character, but we didn't need as much as we got. I wish
The
they focused on the preacher
there's
character
there's
more.
another well, there I agree, and there's another point about the sheriff, tracking him down for prior crimes. They don't really do a very good job, I don't think, in terms of the story in the origin story of Harlan Russ. I don't really get this menacing feeling from him or
Right,
this like you do with Clint in
right,
Unforgiven, right?
right.
You get that, and it's just a difference in a film that first of all, a much different scale and scope,
Right.
budget-wise and talent-wise and all of those sorts of things, but, the acting though, I mean, generally, the acting was decent. The acting was
Yeah,
decent. We both
and
said Frances Fisher got the
where
short shrift. She should have
where
been in a
was
lot.
she?
Right, she wasn't in it that much.
She was in 2 sequences that I remember, and really, she could have been used to forward the story, but instead, they just kinda
Yeah.
brought her on and said, "Here she is, and there she goes."
There was some poorly edited sequences too. I remember one that you pointed out, the young character, Lucas, uh, he again, there's this other, uh, subplot with the Native Americans that they never really
Right.
effectively fleshed out,
No.
but there's a sequence where his character is making an offering of sorts in trade to one of the Native American chiefs or something, and he's handing a rifle over.
Yeah,
You remember you commented, you said
I
there was
did.
this weird because it's like he's
There's a
handing it,
continuity issue.
there's a continuity issue, and then he's, like, holding it upright, and then he's holding and listen, cinephiles, like, those are the kind
That's
of things
right,
we're gonna
we pick up on that
and that's on a
stuff.
first pass, right? That's not
Right,
even
right,
rewatching it,
right.
so alright, Mike, so IMDb has this with a Metascore 47. Now this is interesting. Rotten Tomatoes, who again, whatever you give more credence to or none of the above, Rotten Tomatoes, the critics, 50%, the audience, 74%.
Wow.
It's interesting. It's very
That is
interesting,
surprising
isn't it?
considering
Yeah.
Baldwin's so divisive,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And just all the background about this movie that's out there about how, terrible a set it was, how dangerous it was, how many people quit, how many people
Mhm. Mhm.
complained.
Yeah.
They replaced a bunch of people that were union people who quit because of the hotel or whatever
The accommodations.
the accommodations were. They quit 6 quit over that and were replaced with non-union workers.
Mhm.
All that stuff affects a film.
Sure.
Not to mention probably the most, gifted person being the cinematographer gets killed. Should
Yeah.
this have been released, in your opinion?
I still I still err on the side of, yeah. I'm very much in the camp of you gotta separate the art from the artist or in this case, the art from the incident, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. So I just I think there's just too many examples of that because then it's like revisionist history, right? You gotta go back and then everything like a couple of other things too, sort of related, Mike, other fatal incidents, right? We did an episode on The Crow, one of the most
Yeah,
well-known incidents when Brandon Lee tragically died on the set. And you've mentioned this one before, Twilight Zone, the movie,
correct.
where Vic Morrow and 2 kids died in this helicopter crash from, the
Right,
blade. That was very tragic too. But people are people love The Crow. People talk very favorably of The Crow, as we did on the episode we did on it. So
and
I don't
the
know. A Braveheart, right? We've talked about Mel on the podcast many times.
right,
You're not gonna ever get me to stop watching that film.
right, right.
So I think for those reasons, I put it in that same category. Now, I know we're talking about the loss of life here. It's tragic, but again, The Crow, I just, kind of same thing.
Yeah, and the way they handled that was way different, where they actually used, the actor who died, they used him in
Mhm.
the footage that they had
Right.
to shoot to finish the film. Where here, somebody else had to come in and do a lot of reshooting and
Yeah.
study her work. Now, my pull to it was the fact that the husband
Eh,
executive produced,
yeah.
and that's why I
Yeah.
ultimately said, "Yeah, let's watch this," because he wants his
Mhm.
wife's work seen, and
Mhm.
it was good.
It was
Her
good.
work was really good,
Yeah.
but on the basis of the film, take our
Yeah.
advice and
It
don't waste your time.
Well, it's too bad. Well, I would say, see, that's a tough thing, right? You in one breath, we wanna say, honor
There's some
her
good here.
honor her work, by
Right,
seeing the film, but do so knowing this is not an Academy Award winning film
right.
to be seen, you know, so I don't know how you
I'd
balance
rather
those 2
people make a
things.
donation of 12 bucks or 19 bucks to her family,
Yeah.
something of that nature.
But this was her art. So
I
again,
know.
it's a visual medium, it's to be seen, and I agree. I think with that, again, quote unquote endorsement, yeah, that's a great point. That was another reason I felt like, okay, you know, it's got some sort of backing from her loved one, and
I think
you know,
without
I'm glad I
that,
watched it.
yeah, without his support, I would not have seen it,
But you know,
especially when the director makes a statement like, "I wish this never existed. I wish I never wrote
yeah,
it."
and you understand the comments. I mean, of course you understand it, but you know, once the horse is out of the barn, and right, there's no, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
And again, for people who might have watched the trial like I know you did, the scene where she was actually killed is totally excised from the movie.
Well, it wasn't filmed. That was not being filmed.
Well, we
That
saw it
actual
though.
moment. No, we didn't.
Well,
Yeah,
you didn't
well, no, I
see
know
her
what you
get
mean.
shot, but we saw the leading up in the church. I'm talking
Yeah,
about
the
the church
sequence.
sequence.
Right,
We
right,
saw
right.
that sequence.
I'm just saying they weren't rolling, I don't think, at that particular moment because it wasn't, you know,
Yeah,
he was, remember, supposedly messing around and practicing with the gun and, you know, depending on
and
whose version you
what
believe,
did
but
I say to you while we were watching it? Fairly early on, I was like,
yeah,
"Dan, there's a lot of shooting going on," and we know that
yeah.
the person responsible for the ammunition is sitting in jail.
I mean, from what was shown during the course of that trial, like I said, I saw every day of that trial. You would be hard pressed not to walk away from that and say that this was not a problematic production. You know, the set was riddled with all kinds of issues.
But I kept thinking every time, somebody was shooting at somebody, that could have been another incident because
Yeah,
live rounds got on a set of a movie that should never, ever, ever, ever
absolutely.
happen.
Yeah, yeah. We've talked about that with the Nelms brothers, the directors on the
Right.
podcast. Remember, we asked them that question, and
We did,
they
and
were
they were
very clear.
very
If
blunt. The
you're
protocols are there.
that's right. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, this should never ever happen.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's just a shame that the film itself, you know, the film around her work couldn't have been a bit stronger.
Lived
I
up to it.
there was potential. You know, I remember when I first heard about it before it was even they started filming or anything. I thought, you know, at Baldwin, I said, "Yeah, has he ever done a western?" Like I was intrigued by that idea, and this was a bit of a, as I read, you know, a bit of a passion project for him. And it, you know, it's a shame all around. There's no upside here,
No.
but again, I think, you know, if you're wanting to support, maybe you can take the tack that you said and you make a donation, or you know, watch the film as I think the husband wanted. So,
Yeah.
and we've done just that, and we've presented our take on it, our review. We didn't really want it to be too much about kind of what we've already covered, and really kind of focus on the film itself and talk about what was good and what was bad. But there you go, folks. So, are you going to see it? Are you not going to see Rust? Have you seen Rust? And if so, what's your take on the film? Right? Let us know.
Because
Drop
we
some
don't get a
comments.
lot of westerns. That was another thing that
Yeah.
drew us, and
Right.
Samuel L. Jackson right now is working on a western that looks very old school.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
It's a straight up like dramatic
S
western,
Looks like a straight
seriously.
up,
Yeah.
yeah, western.
Okay. Well, you know, I was thinking too, Mike. This situation in the news. You know, again, we're not to get political. We don't typically go down that road on the podcast, but these tariffs. And I'm just curious, like you, and the reason I'm thinking of this because I, I debated whether or not I would, but I'm going to. Somebody at work gave me a gift. It was a bit of a gag gift, and I said, you know, I don't think I can wear this. And they had given me a lot of other versions, Star Wars, you know, a lot of other different themes that I wear, you know, quite often. Um, but this was the gift. Was this? Can you see these?
It looks like a Trump. Trump socks?
Trump socks. They're Trump socks. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Made in
but
America, I'm
but
sure.
but it made me think of this tariff situation in the news, and particularly the more recent with, again, the Hollywood potential Hollywood impact. So I don't know if you, just curious if you had any take, you've been reading up on
Well,
that.
Juliette Binoche, who's a
Mhm.
European actress, great actor, she was just, Cannes is going on as we speak, and there's tons of foreign films that are shown there. So now for us to see them, are we going to have to pay $30?
Mhm.
I mean, the whole tower thing is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And he keeps backing off, pulling back to get the stock market, because the stock market is tanking over the thought of anything being tariff, because who pays? You and I and the consumer.
Yeah.
It's a tax on us.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to pay $30 to see a movie that was made in France.
But all of these conversations we've had coming out of COVID and, will the box office rebound, et cetera. So now you throw this into the mix and you're like,
Right.
they don't stand a chance.
Just one more strike against the movies that they've got to be. Every time I've been to AMC in the last 3 months, there's maybe 2 rows of people. Now,
Yeah.
I go at odd times, but
Mhm.
still, there's nobody there. And the people who are there are on their phones bugging the shit out of me.
Easy with the
Sorry,
expletives. I
didn't mean
can't.
to
Yeah,
lose
don't
that.
don't force me to edit.
Bugging the heck out of me.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. I mean, it's, again, there's a lot of backpedaling that's taking place and all this different. So you never know, one headline to the next, one day to the next,
Right.
who, what, but it's something that we'll continue to monitor and follow on the podcast, because it, of course, affects or influences the conversations that we have on the podcast. So,
We need to
well,
get people back in the theater. Whatever we
well,
got to do to do that.
and let's bring it back around full circle to the start of the conversation. And one man that will surely do that is this guy right here, Tom Cruise, because we know this is going to be another. What do you think, Mike? Is the final mission going to hit $1 billion?
I hope
Your
so. I
prediction?
hope they haven't shown too much in the trailers, which they did in the first. Remember, this was Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Part 2. They changed it
Right.
to Final Reckoning. I
Hmm.
think it's going to do big money the opening weekend, and then word of mouth will dictate
Yeah.
whether or not people will see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw him. It's a theater, some screening for. I forget which mission they were showing. But Tom was there and he stood in front of the audience in the theater and just was so gracious and just saying, this is why we do this. I'm grateful that you're even here. What, he's just very kind of humble and
I've been a fan of most of these movies. I think the second one
mhm,
wasn't so good. The rest were pretty solid. The last one, my big problem was I saw so much in the trailer
mm,
that
yeah,
by the time we watched it,
right.
it was like, okay, there's no surprise here.
And there has been a lot shown, so I don't know what
Yeah.
to think about that. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's for another episode. We'll surely be covering that one on the Over the podcast. But
Sure.
all right, that's going to do it for another episode of the Over the podcast. Been your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.